He started out as Conan the Barbarian, and then he became Torak, Hero of Prehistory. And this was done by Mark Taylor. Mark Taylor was to come out with a hero. This may not seem like He-Man, but in fact it is, by Mark Taylor for Mattel. And here's another prototype. And this is very similar to Vicor from the lore that we have now, also by Taylor. Different concepts and ideas. And these were the toys that were to come out. I think these were the Fighting Foe Men, as originally before they were called Masters. And this was the prototype He-Man with the Iron Cross, the signature cross and battle axe. But then Roger Sweet, another designer, came in and did his meddling, his designs. But anyway, here is, of course, the famous harness that we now know to accept as the He-Man. The He-Man toy for the Masters of the Universe line from '81. Now, this much of the lore I'm not much clear on since I was 3 years old. And I remember the original story from the Viewmasters I had. They made Viewmasters of these stories, of the mini-comics. The original He-Man was a barbarian, of course, who left his tribe of people. In later lore, he's known as Ular, a different He-Man. But this guy left his tribe. There was no Prince Adam. He was on his own. He left, like Link in search of Zelda from Ganondorf in the Nintendo games. He leaves his small village and goes out on a journey, on a quest. And he meets the sorceress and all that. And the sorceress was green skin like Serpos goddess, gave him the harness. Now, there were two harnesses. As I always knew from the original Viewmasters that without the harness, he'd be weak against Beastman and Merman. But there were two. One was a force field and one was strength. So he needed one for strength and another one for the force field. That was sort of the lore of it. I know it's kind of confusing to kids back then. But by the end of the 4 mini comics, he became well defined. By the time he made his DC traditional magazine comics debut, these were short-lived series, he already had the identity with Prince Adam in the Filmation cartoons. Now, this is the He-Man that I remember, done by, my God, I can't remember the man's name, John Irwin. And he made He-Man this fatherly figure. He always sounded like Dad. I remember him doing the Morris the Cat commercials. But he gave He-Man that definition of higher moral. And always gave morals at the end of each episode, along with Orko and Man-at-Arms. And while that was going on, there were different versions of He-Man with, I guess it was the Golden comics. I remember having, not Golden, but Golden books. Different ones around the world. Even in Marvel Star Comics, where they had Alf, the alien Alf, He-Man was traveling to the future to find Skeletor, took over 30 years later. So that was a big hook for this. And whether he was fighting Skeletor, the Snake Man, or the Horde, they had to get on those gimmicks. I remember seeing a kid in my first or probably the second grade. Maybe it was the first grade in 1985. Wait a minute, when was that? I think that might have been 85 or 86, probably 1985. And He-Man would have this silver armor that would damage when you pushed on the button. So it was Battle Armor He-Man, and then Thunder Punch He-Man, and then Flying Fist He-Man. I don't think I ever got Flying Fist He-Man. But there were always gimmicks to all these ones. And Thunder Punch would do something. He would have a blasting cap in the back. I still have the original one to this. Time passed. Filmation was still making cartoons. He-Man, She-Ra, the Christmas special, which I remember fondly. By the time the Dolph Lundgren movie came out, that was kind of signaling the end of the traditional He-Man. I didn't watch very much of it. I didn't care for like 60% of it. But I like that the characters were true to themselves in the whole movie. I think that's what kind of worked for me. But the rest of it was just silly. It was like low budget. They go to the real world and deal with cops and all that. Now we go forward in time to the year 1990 or 1989 with the sort of the Japanese anime version of He-Man. And this was done by the voice of Gary Chalk, who would go on to do Man-at-Arms and Optimus Prime. He was the second voice of Optimus Prime for Transformers Armada. And I was not impressed with this cartoon, watching a lot of reruns recently. I never thought Skeletor was intimidating. I thought, well, this guy's kind of an idiot. He-Man's cool. He-Man's all right. Gary did the best he could. The way of the magic, the way of the good. And the morals in this one are more technical in that buckle your safety belt, wear a helmet when you ride a bike, Always have enough spare change. Things that are more technical, right? Don't speed. If you ever ride your bike, make sure you get a license and a tag for your bike. Stuff like that. More technical things. This was the Space He-Man. Didn't last very long. He was born out of the comic strips, I think, in the United Kingdom. I'm not sure what they were going for, but he was the only person. It was only He-Man and Skeletor in the future, and everybody else stayed home in Eternia 1,000 years ago. Made kind of little sense. But we go ahead 10 years. Oh yeah, one side note: the DC Comics He-Man would cross over with Superman. Now, this is the He-Man I remember the most because my dad passed away around the same year that this He-Man was born. Why do I remember him more? Because honestly, when the Filmation cartoons came about, I didn't remember very much. The only one I could remember very well was the Shaping Staff. That was with Faker, and the Sorceress was turned into a tree, and it looked like the bad guys were winning. And this is done by Cam Clark, the voice. Emiliano Santalucia did the art. He's a toy modeler. Val Staples, Mike Young, they worked on the comics and the TV shows. And it was great for 3 seasons. You had He-Man here. You had other versions, of course. And then there was the Snake Armor version. Here he is in his snake armor. This is for season 3 with King Hiss and Skeletor. It was sad that He-Man ended. Now, I don't know if Val Staples was telling the truth when he said Mattel was trying to take away He-Man.org. That was bullshit. If that was true, that's absolute bullshit. But I think some of you who have been around long enough remember that fiasco. And these are the coolest toys. I mean, this one, I think they have to replace the battery in this one. But it was very cool when these things were out. And it still has its VHS tape in here. I think what I liked was that the cartoons were, He-Man was growing up with me. The cartoons were more serious. They were more serious. They still had their morals at the end, but they were serious. They were more on point. They weren't as funny. There were less stories. There were more characters. I say there was more lore and more characters in the original cartoons, but the tone was better in the second one, or the third one if you want to count Space He-Man. So it was sad. I mean, we didn't see He-Man for a while. And then He-Man returned in classic form. According to the encyclopedia here, Faker killed King Randor. So there's some whole thing about being banished to Spondos. Whole backstory. And most of this was told in the mini comics and the descriptions in the back of the boxes. So, I mean, Randor died horribly. But, and here are the different versions of He-Man that you might be familiar with. But I remember some of the mini comics in which She-Ra turned into Despera the first time. And He-Man was king. He married Teela. They had a son named Dare, which was Hero 2. Little weird storylines like that. And here's the laser light He-Man that we'll probably never see again. They're trying to release all these new figures a different way. But I have a version of this one. Does it look better than the one I showed you? He-Man here appears as the final, the solution to the reign of evil Superman in Injustice versus Masters of the Universe, which was I thought it was a great ending to all of Injustice. Tom Taylor may not agree. He didn't write it, but I liked it. It had a very Return of the Jedi feel to everything. And this was Eternity War. Now, in Eternity War, Randor died by King Hiss's will. And when Skeletor, you had She-Ra, you had the final battle. You had the Masters, the death of the Snake Men. You had Skeletor. Adam woke up from his slumber from being possessed. He was a child when he helped Randor, Adam was. But here, there was a final battle between He-Man and Skeletor. And after all this, his outfit is very different. He wears pants. They kind of made him less sexy to, no more loincloth, more of a costume. And this happened over time. It definitely happened with the space outfit. But as you notice, even in stuff like this, he's got a protection for his loincloth. So they make the costumes more practical, more. I like this. This we'll get into later with Man at Arms, but the costume is way more practical. And at some point, after the battle with Skeletor, after ending Skeletor, we have the power. This was so important because this starts to set up the CGI cartoon that we have been seeing for the last 2 years, which was the floating Castle Grayskull and all that. Does this look familiar to you? This looks like the cartoon, right? In which he leads people like himself. The power is ours, da, da, da. And so you start to see the beginnings of that. And She-Ra's got to go help out. She's got to redeem herself in Etheria. They get married, and of course, Keldor returns. But here he says, I have been waiting for you. I've been expecting you. Are you ready? You have the power, which leads to the incarnation of this He-Man. Very bulky. His sword turns into a shield. Very majestic. Different from what you'd expect. After 42 years, He-Man started out as a Viking, much like Marvel Comics, that one barbarian guy. I don't know if it was Conan the Barbarian in Marvel Comics, but they were trying to go for an Arnold Schwarzenegger, I guess, aspect. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's sequel from Conan was more like He-Man, the second movie, Conan the Destroyer. But anyway, regardless of that, this was such a great roller coaster to show He-Man now from a guy that was in the sort of the fallout, the post-apocalyptic world where there was just Castle Grayskull and villages and caves and Skeletor, and that was it, to Prince Adam, to meeting Superman, to these different versions from the 1990s, 2002, and then eventually this version. He shares his power now. He shares his power with Crass, with Battle Cat, with Duncan, with Teela. Everybody has the power, and that's what it's all about. It really is. Hope you enjoyed this. This was a retrospective of He-Man from 1981 to 2023. If you like what you see those icons below or to the side, you know what to do.